Good morning, good morning. All right, we are ready for another episode of Hungry Sheep, going through the book of Revelation right now, verse by verse. And I think that over the next few episodes, a lot of things are going to start to open up based on what I'm seeing. I've been looking through a lot of material, sifting through a lot of material, looking at things pretty deeply, and I think it has yielded quite a bit of light as we're going to go through into chapter 10 here. So looking forward to sharing this with y'all. All right, well, let's start in verse 1 of Revelation 10. It says, "And I saw another mighty angel come down from heaven, clothed with a cloud, and a rainbow was upon his head. And his face was as it were the sun, and his feet as pillars of fire." All right, so it talks about this mighty angel in verse 1. And the question is about the identity of the mighty angel. Who is this mighty angel? Now, if you look at that verse carefully, you might see why some, in fact many, believe that the angel is Christ. Great commentators like Gabaline, for example, if you're familiar with him, have asserted that this is indeed Jesus Christ, and mainly because of the similarities between this and the description of Christ back in chapter 1. And I'll just go through and compare those for you. You can flip back and forth if you want. So if you look at this angel, Revelation 10:1, you see that it says he is clothed with a cloud, very similar to earlier descriptions of the glorified Christ. For instance, Revelation 1:7 says he cometh with the clouds. A little bit different than being clothed with a cloud, but nevertheless, clouds. Another aspect of this description is a rainbow was upon his head. And that's familiar to the revelation we saw earlier, chapter 4, verse 3. There was a rainbow round about the throne of Christ. So, and then of course you have over in Ezekiel chapter 1, the parallel vision there. He also sees a rainbow there above the head of Christ, above the throne. So let's look at another parallel. His face was as it were the sun. And you go back to Revelation 1:16, it talks about Jesus. It says his countenance was as the sun shineth in his strength. And then lastly, it says this mighty angel's feet are as pillars of fire, kind of similar to Revelation 1:15, where it talks about the feet of Christ's feet like unto fine brass, as if they burned in a furnace, as if they burned, the implication being fiery. But in spite of such parallels, and I think you could see why many would strongly insist that this is Christ. Many are insisting that this cannot be Jesus, and one of those is the famous commentator Henry Alford. Wrote that massive kind of like a guidebook to the New Testament. It's a huge volume with all kinds of details about the Greek, very intricate details about the Greek, a lot of great stuff from his work. But anyway, Henry Alford said, and I quote, "This angel is not and cannot be our Lord himself. Such a supposition would, it seems to me, entirely break through the consistency of apocalyptic analogy. Throughout the book, as before observed on chapter 8, verse 3, angels are the ministers of the divine purposes and the carriers out of the apocalyptic course of procedure, but are everywhere distinct from the divine persons themselves," end quote. Now, it's important that we carefully test Alfred's conclusion, right, saying that this cannot be Jesus Christ. We have to test that because these similarities between the mighty angel of chapter 10 and the earlier descriptions of Jesus are compelling, which is why many have been led to conclude that this is Jesus. First, we need to acknowledge that at face value, the prospect of this angel being Jesus seems doubtful. Remember that chapter 10 is just another scene of one great vision. We've already seen Jesus in the vision. Importantly, he was not described as an angel. We saw the glorified Christ walking amongst the candlesticks in chapter 1. We saw him pictured as the slain lamb in chapters 5 and 6, but not as an angel. Not here, not in Revelation so far. It should be noted, though, that the Lord is often described as an angel throughout the Old Testament, the angel of the Lord. And that angel of the Lord, who we know, theologically, we know is the pre-incarnate Christ, before the incarnation, before God came in the flesh, before Jesus walked the earth, right? Well, the Son of God, the second person of the Trinity, okay, he manifested himself throughout the Old Testament as this angel of the Lord. You can see it in Genesis 16:13, Genesis 22:15 and 16, Exodus 3, verses 2 and 4. And I gave you those references specifically because it shows that this angel of the Lord is in fact deity. He is God. So there are appearances of God, manifestations of God. We call these Christophanies throughout the Old Testament, appearing as an angel. That's a fact. Now, while it is certain that Christ made pre-incarnate appearances as the angel of the Lord throughout the Old Testament, the question we need to answer is, does Christ appear as an angel, capital A, angel, anywhere in the apocalyptic genre? Remember, that's what Henry Alford is saying. He's saying this is just this idea that, Christ appearing as an angel, this is totally foreign to apocalyptic books, the apocalyptic genre. So does this angel of the Lord, the pre-incarnate Christ, appear anywhere in the apocalyptic genre? I'm talking about like Ezekiel, Daniel, Zechariah, those which are parallel with the visions of Revelation, have a lot of apocalyptic imagery and so forth that connects with Revelation. And the clear answer to that, surprisingly, is yes. Jesus does appear as the angel of the Lord within the apocalyptic books. In Zechariah 1 and Zechariah chapter 3, the angel of the Lord, who was affirmed to be God, as we said earlier in the Old Testament books, again speaks as God, showing himself to be deity. But beyond that clear example in Zechariah chapters 1 and 3, there's another passage that we need to examine. And this one comes up a lot when people are discussing this mighty angel of Revelation chapter 10. There's often reflection and discussion on Daniel chapter 10 and a figure who shows up there who has a lot of similarities. And, if the figure in Daniel 10, this man we're going to talk about that appears in Daniel 10, verses 5 and 6, if the man in Daniel 10 is the pre-incarnate Christ, well, then that would be an example in the apocalyptic genre of Christ in a very similar appearance to this figure in Revelation 10. Let me just read Daniel 10, verses 5 through 6, and you'll see kind of the similarity of the description to the mighty angel in Revelation 10. So comparing Daniel 10, the figure in Daniel 10, with the mighty angel of Revelation 10. Let's see how similar this is. Then I lifted up mine eyes and looked, and behold, a certain man clothed in linen, whose loins were girded with fine gold of Uphaz. His body was like the beryl, and his face as the appearance of lightning, and his eyes as lamps of fire, and his arms and his feet like in color to polished brass, and the voice of his words like the voice of a multitude. So just comparing these between Daniel 10 and Revelation 10, just like the mighty angel in Revelation 10, this figure has much in common with both Ezekiel and Daniel's visions of the glorified Christ. Okay, let's compare this. So remember, looking at Daniel 10. I'm looking at Daniel 10, and I'm going to be comparing it with the visions of Christ, especially in Revelation. Okay, I want to look at this figure in Daniel 10, and I want to compare it to visions of Christ in Revelation. My goal here is to answer that question. Is the figure in Daniel 10, okay, not Revelation 10. We're not talking about the mighty angel anymore in Revelation 10. We're looking at Daniel 10, this figure. We're asking, is this a pre-incarnate Christ? Because that, once we answer that question, it becomes important. So, first of all, the figure in Daniel 10, he's clothed in linen. Now, in Revelation 1:13, we do see that Jesus is clothed with a garment down to the foot. We don't see, it doesn't talk about what the garment's made of, but nevertheless, okay. Secondly, it says this figure in Daniel 10, it says his loins were girded with fine gold of Uphaz. And, you got gold, kind of a sash or belt around the waist area. Revelation 1:13, it does say Jesus was girded about the paps with a golden girdle, so kind of a golden band around his waist. Thirdly, the Daniel 10 figure, his body was like the beryl. I don't see any parallels there. Next, his face as the appearance of lightning. Not really any direct connection with the lightning, appearance of the face as lightning. But it says his eyes as lamps of fire. There is some similarity there to Revelation 1:14. Jesus' eyes are as a flame of fire, and also similar language in Revelation 19:12. The Daniel 10 figure, his arms and his feet are like in color to polished brass. Similar to Revelation 1:15 of Christ, his feet like unto fine brass, as if they were burned, as if they burned in a furnace. Lastly, the Daniel 10 figure, the voice of his words like the voice of a multitude. Kind of similar to Revelation 1:15, where Christ's voice is said to be as the sound of many waters. So, many believe that the Daniel 10 figure is Christ. It should be noted, and by the way, this is important because if the Daniel 10 figure is Christ, and we believe the Daniel 10 figure is an angel, then that would also be an instance of Christ appearing as an angel within the apocalyptic genre. So that's why it's important to determine this figure in Daniel 10. But it needs to be noted that some of these descriptions of this figure in Daniel 10 also match descriptions of known angels. So we saw there are some similarities between the Daniel 10 figure and the descriptions of Christ, but those same descriptions also fit descriptions of beings we know to be just angels. Let's go through it again and compare the Daniel 10 figure not to descriptions of Christ, but to descriptions of angels throughout the Bible that we know are just non-divine, not deity, just angels. So first of all, again, Daniel 10 figures clothed in linen. Well, Revelation 15:6 says 7 angels came out of the temple having the 7 plagues, clothed in pure and white linen. So there you have white linen on regular angels. Secondly, the Daniel 10 figure, his loins were girded with fine gold of Uphaz. Well, those same angels over in Revelation 15 says they have their breasts girded with golden girdles. And back to the Daniel 10 figure, his body's like beryl, no direct similarity there that I can find, or connection. Next, his face has the appearance of lightning. You do have a connection here. Very compelling. Matthew 28:3 talks about the angel, after Christ's resurrection, the angel's countenance was like lightning. Next, the Daniel 10 figure, his eyes as lamps of fire. No real direct connection there that I could find. But next, his arms and his feet, like in color to polished brass. Well, if you look at Ezekiel 1:7, descriptions of angelic creatures there, it says their feet were straight feet and the sole of a calf's foot. They sparkled like the color of burnished brass. And lastly, the Daniel 10 figure and the voice of his words like the voice of a multitude. No real connection there. But in any case, if you look at this, trying to figure out, is this Daniel 10 figure, highly debated, just like the Revelation 10 angel, the Daniel 10 figure, is it Christ or is it just a normal angel? Out of the descriptions, 5 out of 7 of them are fairly close matches to descriptions of Christ, but as we saw, not really exact. And 4 out of 7 of them are fairly close matches to angels. Probably maybe one of the most striking is, the golden girdles, but one of the most striking is probably the angel's countenance being like lightning, Matthew 28:3. But anyway, it seems in light of these comparisons that the man or angel of Daniel 10 could be either the pre-incarnate Christ or just one of God's mighty angels. Some commentators claim that this cannot be Christ. We're talking about Daniel 10, the man in Daniel 10, because in the context, that angel, if he's an angel, he is hindered by the prince of Persia, who is evidently a demon, and because he needed the help of Michael the archangel. So, is Christ going to be hindered by a demon? Is he going to need the help of an archangel? It seems like these things would align better with this being one of God's angels rather than God himself. So putting aside the highly debated figure in Daniel 10, though, we still have appearances of Christ as the angel of the Lord in Zechariah. And since Zechariah is in the apocalyptic genre and is deeply interconnected with Revelation, it seems that Henry Alford's conclusion is wrong. Christ can and does appear as an angel within the apocalyptic genre. All right. So with that in mind, let's look at this angel in Revelation 10 once again. All right, going back to the mighty angel of Revelation 10. Notice that this angel is a closer match to this angel is a closer match to the Revelation 1 description of Jesus than the figure in Daniel 10 was. First of all, he's this mighty angel in Revelation 10:1. He's clothed with a cloud. Again, Jesus is said to come on the clouds, Revelation 1:7. A rainbow was upon his head. Okay, Revelation 4:3 talks about a rainbow being around the throne of Christ. His face was as it were the sun. Okay, Revelation 1:16 talks about Jesus' countenance was as the sun shineth in his strength. And lastly, his feet as pillars of fire, similar to Revelation 1:15. Jesus' feet like undefined brass, as if they burned in a furnace. So this figure in Revelation 10, okay, is closer to the descriptions of the glorified Christ than the man in the linen garment back in Daniel 10. This one seems closer. This close correspondence has caused, as I said, many to insist that this is Jesus in Revelation chapter 10, verse 1, that he's appearing as a mighty angel. But while this compelling case can be made, we have to keep in mind that while great and powerful angels are not divine, biblical descriptions of them show that they are radiant and glorious beings. We should note that this is not the first time that we have seen a mighty angel in Revelation. And I think this is really a key observation right here. Go back to Revelation 5, verse 2. We saw a, quote, strong angel, and it's the same in the Greek as the mighty angel of Revelation 10:1. And that angel back in Revelation 5:2, that was not Jesus. It couldn't possibly be Jesus. You read Revelation 5:2. John says, and I saw a strong angel. Okay, could be just as well translated mighty angel. I saw a strong angel proclaiming with a loud voice, who is worthy to open the book and to loose the seals thereof? And this is why it's important, because the context, indicates this is another mighty angel. It's another mighty angel. So, and you see later on in Revelation 18, verse 21, another mighty angel, same wording, another mighty angel takes up a stone and casts it into the sea, yet another instance of the term, but it does not refer to Jesus. And notice that it's said of the angel in chapter 18, Revelation 18, verse 1, that, quote, the earth was lightened with his glory. And yet we know that's not Jesus. It seems like, something that could be describing Jesus. The earth was lightened with his glory. Just trying to point out here that these angels, especially the mighty angels, probably the archangels, they're very powerful, glorious beings. So, after carefully examining these facts, weighing all the comparisons, it seems to me that while Christ being depicted as an angel is not beyond the realm of possibility in the apocalyptic genre, as Henry Alford seems to have suggested, this angel in Revelation 10:1, despite compelling commonalities with earlier descriptions of Christ, is not actually Christ, but is one of Christ's powerful and glorious angels. So, that's the argument. And now, moving on to verse 2, okay, it talks about this angel, this mighty angel, and what he had. It says, and he had in his hand a little book open, and he set his right foot upon the sea and his left foot on the earth. Now, some commentators note that this angel is holding the little book in his left hand, or he must be holding it in his left hand, because as verse 5 shows, he's about to raise his right hand up to heaven in an oath. Now you compare the little book, or the little roll, okay, in the Greek, the little roll, with the book we saw back in chapter 5, verse 1. Remember that book. I'll read chapter 5, verse 1. And I saw in the right hand of him that sat on the throne a book written within and on the backside, sealed with 7 seals. Now evidently that larger roll contained the entire scheme of God's judgment upon the earth for the last days. You can see it throughout the book of Revelation unfolding, seal after seal after seal, judgments coming upon the earth. So you have the whole scheme of God's judgment in that larger roll. But I like what, in the Jameson Fawcett Brown commentary, I like what they say, quote, this other, a less book, contained only a portion which John was now to make his own. And they point to verse 9 and verse 10, where John is basically told to eat the little book, take the book from the angel and eat it. Very interesting if you look down to those verses. But anyway, continuing their quote, he's now to make it his own and then use it in prophesying to others. So, and I might add, just by way of application here, as it was with John, so it is with us. There's a great scroll of God's sovereign plan, unrolling as time progresses, as time goes on toward the consummation of all things. But then there's also a smaller scroll, a smaller book that God has put into our hands, the Bible, the inspired, inerrant Word of God, and we are to eat the book, as it were, eat the scroll. We're to internalize it and then declare it to the world. Some commentators tell us that this little book is probably the title deed to the earth. They see the angel planting his feet on land and sea as the, quote, appropriation of Christ's promised inheritance as Messiah, basically taking dominion over the earth. And we're going to see very soon as we come through chapter 11, the kingdoms of this world becoming the kingdoms of our God. So there's an argument for that. Whether there's an argument that the book is the title deed of the earth, that one is definitely a little bit strained. For evidence of this book being a title deed to the earth, some point to Jeremiah 32, verses 10 and 11. There, the prophet Jeremiah is instructed to buy a field, despite the fact that Israel was about to go into captivity. And that was to be a sign that one day Israel would be regathered into the land. However, there's actually no indication that this has anything to do with the little book in Revelation 10 in the hand of this mighty angel. Nevertheless, the mighty angel planting his feet on land and sea does seem to indicate, as one has put it, quote, that his coming has to do with the destiny of all creation. And you can see that if you look down at verse 6, when he lifts his right hand up, he swears to God, calling upon God to bear witness to him, and calling upon God as the creator, of the earth and the sea and all that's in it. Very similar language there, having to do with creation. So in any case, let's go down to verse 3 now. It talks about what this mighty angel does, and it says, he cried with a loud voice, as when a lion roareth. And when he had cried, 7 thunders uttered their voices. Verse 4, and when the 7 thunders had uttered their voices, I was about to write, and I heard a voice from heaven saying unto me, seal up those things which the 7 thunders uttered, and write them not. What a powerful image this evokes. Think about it. A massive, glorious angel, radiant, his face like lightning, right? His feet are planted on land and sea, crying out with a voice like the roar of a lion. And what are these 7 thunders? Remember, when he cries out like a roaring lion, there's 7 thunders that are heard. John hears them. When we consider that the angel is about to blow the 7th trumpet of divine judgment here, which contains within it the 7 bowls of wrath, we're led to believe that the 7 thunders may be announcing the outpouring of great wrath on the earth. And we can't know the content of those thunders, because as John is about to write them, God forbid him from writing them. He sealed them up so no one could know what those 7 thunders are saying. But throughout Scripture and in Revelation, thunder is used to symbolize judgment, very consistent symbology. Also, consider what the Bible seems to indicate about the contents of that little book in the angel's hand. You go over to Revelation 10, verse 9. Go down a little bit. The angel, he gives the little book to John. It says, the angel said unto me, take it and eat it up, and it shall make thy belly bitter, but it shall be in thy mouth sweet as honey. Now this parallels with what happened to Ezekiel, and I believe the Holy Spirit wants us to make this connection. Back in Ezekiel chapter 2, verses 8 through 10. But thou, son of man, hear what I say unto thee. Be not thou rebellious like that rebellious house. Open thy mouth, and eat that I give thee. And when I looked, behold, an hand was sent unto me, and lo, a roll of a book was therein. And he spread it before me, and it was written within and without, and there was written therein lamentations and mourning and woe. And notice that last part, what was in the book, right? And this no doubt has to do with the bitterness. It talks about the bitterness. Lamentations, mourning, and woe. So just awful, horrifying judgments. One commentator actually said that the 7 thunders, the judgments being pronounced by those 7 thunders may be so horrifying, terrifyingly awful that God doesn't want us to hear them. Now, I don't know if I agree with that, because, look, anyone who's read Deuteronomy 28 and Leviticus 26 knows that God does not shrink back from declaring some of the most awful, dreadful, severe judgments. And in fact, Jesus talked about the suffering the wailing, the weeping, the suffering of hell very often, which is like the worst possible suffering there could be. So I don't necessarily agree with that, but nevertheless, it's sealed up. But it seems to indicate that this is very, very severe judgment being announced upon the earth. All right, now let's go down to verse 5, Revelation 10, verse 5. And the angel which I saw stand upon the sea and upon the earth lifted up his hand to heaven, and swear by him that liveth forever and ever, who created heaven and the things that therein are, and the earth and the things that therein are, and the sea and the things which are therein, that there should be time no longer. Some have actually said that this angel, the mighty angel, cannot be Jesus because he swears to God, right, calls upon God as witness, and, God would never call upon God to witness. But that's actually not really good logic, because in Hebrews, God actually swears by himself because there's none higher to swear by. I think it's Hebrews chapter 6. But in any case, we've already talked about this, that the angel, for other reasons, better reasons, cannot be Jesus Christ. But anyway, he lifts up his hand. He lifts up his hand to heaven. He swears by God, the one who lives forever, who created everything, and that there should be time no longer. These verses, verses 5 and 6, have been misunderstood. Revelation 10, verses 5 and 6 have been misunderstood to mean that there will literally be no more time, and that the eternal state will be a state of timelessness. Of course, we know that God is timeless, ultimately. He's transcendent. He transcends time. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, which included time. That's why when people ask the question, who created God? Well, nobody created God. God is timeless. He's eternal. You think about the whole timeline of history. God's not on it. God, yes, he works in it, but God is not on that timeline because he created the timeline. He's not subject to time as if he had to have a beginning and an end. He's outside of time. He's eternal. He's timeless. And some people have thought that maybe that's the case, that, in the eternal state, in the consummation of all things, we're just going to live in this kind of in a timeless state. But that's not true. That's not the picture that the Bible actually paints. In fact, if you go over to Ephesians 2:7, it talks about the ages to come. And it refers to the future state as an age, as time, as things happening. And, there's going to be events that happen in time in the future. So rather than saying that time itself will no longer exist, the angel is basically saying, time's up, if I could put it into the vernacular, time's up. The angel is not actually going to sound the seventh trumpet until Revelation 11:15. That's very interesting. He's saying, time no longer, and yet he's not going to blow that trumpet until the next chapter, chapter 11, verse 15. Before that happens, before he sounds, now he's getting ready to sound that trumpet, but before that happens, as we continue to read through chapter 10 and into chapter 11 up until the actual sounding, there is a period of 1,260 days in which the two witnesses of Revelation 11 will prophesy and plague the earth and the beast system. Interestingly, that 1,260 days is the same amount of days that the woman of Revelation 12 hides away for. So you look at Revelation 12:6, it talks about the woman and the woman. There's a lot of symbolism, by the way, Revelation 12. We're going to get there. The woman fled into the wilderness where she hath a place prepared of God, that they should feed her there 1,260 days. Okay, that's the 1,260 days. She flees away into the wilderness for that long. You compare that down to verse 14 of chapter 12. So just a few verses down, chapter 12, verse 14. And to the woman were given 2 wings of a great eagle, that she might fly into the wilderness. There it is, in the wilderness again. Into her place, where she is nourished for a time and times and half a time from the face of the serpent. So she's being hidden away from the devil, from the serpent. So this 1,260 days, okay, that it talks about, right? It's interesting because it also seems to parallel the time period when the first beast of Revelation 13 makes war against the saints. So you just compare it. Go to Revelation 11:2, okay? And as I already said, Revelation 11, this is kind of happening in between the time when we first see this mighty angel. The mighty angel shows up in Revelation 10:1, okay? He doesn't blow his trumpet till later on in Revelation 11, okay? And in between him showing up there and the actual blowing of that seventh trumpet, there's this period, 1,260 days. So you see there, look at Revelation 11:2, it says, "But the court which is without the temple leave out and measure it not, for it is given unto the Gentiles." Listen to this. "And the holy city shall they tread underfoot 42 months." That 42 months, 1,260 days. You got, 30 days per month according to the Jewish reckoning. So 30 days per month times 42, that's 1,260 days. And so Revelation 11:2 says, so before this angel gets to blow in that trumpet, there's going to be these 42 months, it's 1,260 days, and the Gentiles are going to tread underfoot the holy city, okay? You compare that, okay? That's right here in Revelation 11:2. Interestingly, this is very interesting, and this is where it blows my mind, and we're going to get into this. In Revelation 13:5, okay, it talks about that first beast rising out of the sea, and it says, "There was given unto him a mouth speaking great things and blasphemies, and power was given unto him to continue 42 months. 42 months, and that's when he makes war against the saints and all this, okay? Now, this 42 months, okay, we're going to get into this. It really opens up a can of worms. It has left me perplexed as to where we are at in chapter 11 of Revelation, and that's what we're going to be digging into next time. Because the 42 months here that we see in Revelation 11, okay, I know we're only in Revelation 10, okay, I get it, but we're going to look at this. Before we move any more forward, we're going to look at this 42 months that happens right here, right before this angel sounds the seventh trumpet, because this is a serious time marker in the book of Revelation, and it's really going to put our interpretation to the test. I'll give you a little hint of what we're going to be talking about next time, okay? Because by this 42 months, we have a powerful connection to Daniel 12. You're going to see that time period come up in Daniel 12. You're going to see a lot of connections popping up here, and we're going to be going through some of that in our next episode. All right. Well, thank you for listening. Looking forward to digging into to chapter 10 and 11 as we move forward, and hopefully this will really help to get us locked in on a correct interpretation of the timeline of these events. All right, well, a little bit shorter episode, but a lot in there. So God bless you, and you have a great day till next time.